I'm Emma. I'm actually an anthropologist, and I'm the VP of Human Insights at IIeX. So you might be wondering, what does an anthropologist have to do with innovation? You wouldn't be alone. My mother also wonders what an anthropologist has to do with innovation. And I like to sort of introduce myself often by saying, just to level set, because I don't want to presume that people know what anthropologists do, I don't do bones, and I don't do stones. We do people. So we've been doing this work using anthropology to understand the people we're designing for at IIeX. I've been doing this for around 8 years. And when I came into the field, it was all about empathy, right? The reason why we do this research is to develop empathy so that we can design better products and experiences. But what I've learned over the better part of a decade is that it's the reframe that gets us to the empathy. And without that reframe, we're not always identifying the most opportunistic opportunities. So with that, I will dive right in. So consumers or humans? It seems like a nuanced difference, but actually sometimes we find that if we're not looking at the people that we're designing for as humans, we may be developing strategies that aren't going in the right direction. So our clients at IIeX are mostly Fortune 500 and more Fortune 300 companies. We work in the areas of consumer packaged goods, business and financial services, healthcare, technology, automotive. I've never encountered a client that isn't passionate about creating incredible customer experiences. But what we try to do is, instead of approaching these as customer experiences, opening these up to human experiences. And the way that we do that is by asking different questions, right? When we're not asking human questions, we may not be understanding what we need to understand to really develop interesting, meaningful, and differentiated opportunities. So this is where anthropology comes back in, because we use anthropology as a tool to go beyond the consumer and ask those human questions. So we know that a consumer or a user or a patient, there's someone who partakes in your products, or in a service, right? But a human being is so much more dynamic than that. And if you look at this picture, there's this dude and he's taking his kids grocery shopping. If any of you are parents, you've seen this scenario before. He's got a 3-year-old having a tantrum on the floor, right? When we look at this man and his role and his identity as a consumer, we're missing these broader webs of meaning and experience that are shaping this moment for him, right? When we look at him through the lens of the consumer, it really limits our understanding of the problem that we're trying to solve for him. And in many ways, it may limit our ability to conceptualize new forms of value creation for him in this moment, right? Because again, as humans, we are embedded in these really rich and dynamic webs of experience and action. We are parents, we are siblings, we are children, we are employees, we are friends, and we are so much more than consumers. So a little bit of an Anthropology 101 to start to show you how we get to this place, to show the kinds of questions that we think we need to ask. So a little bit of an Anthropology 101 here. So anthropology is about how we understand human behavior through the lens of culture. So culture is the shared meanings and beliefs, norms and values that underpin and shape why we do the things that we do. So ethnography, I'm sure you're all very familiar with ethnography. It's the research method used by anthropologists and other researchers, and it involves participant observation of the experiences that shape everyday life, right? It's the deep hanging out. So this fellow over here to the right is Bronislaw Malinowski. He was a pretty important social anthropologist of the 20th century, and he's hanging out here doing focus groups with a group of Trobriand islanders. So it's not really a focus group, but what Bronislaw Malinowski is doing here is exploring the broader contexts that give meaning to some of the actions that he was observing when he was deep hanging out with these people. And thick description is another really important principle for the Anthropology 101 course that we're doing here today. Thick description is about situating experiences in broader contexts, exploring these webs of meaning and action to reveal new understandings of human behavior. Okay, so we're going to dive into this thick description a little bit more because for us, we think this thick description is really important for developing the contextual understanding necessary to reframe. So Clifford Geertz is another anthropologist, an American anthropologist, who talked a lot about the thick description. And he uses the idea of the difference between a wink and a blink to bring the significance of the thick description to life. So a wink and a blink. On the surface, these two gestures appear identical. It's a rapid opening and shutting of the eyelid. But actually, there's worlds of difference between these two gestures. The first, a blink, is an automatic response that your body has. It's part of your nervous system and your body's ability to keep your eyes moist and dirt and debris out of your eye. Pretty simple. A wink, on the other hand, is quite pregnant with meaning. A wink may be a conspiratorial gesture. It may be a way to tell someone across the room that you've got a secret. It may even be an expression of sexual desire. The point is, unless we look at the thick description, unless we explore the context underpinning that gesture, we can't really interpret it, and we can't really explain what it means or why it's happening. So we use anthropology to excavate the context that surrounds the wink and the blink. And we start to see what it means, often quite differently than we did before. So when we get back to the context of innovation, anthropological insights allow us to excavate new meanings. And this is kind of where the reframe is born. It's born when we're working in the context of innovation, and when we move from looking at the people that we're studying and designing for, and we move from looking at them as consumers to humans, this is what really allows us to get that really rich context, to provide that thick description, so that we're able to share stories and narratives about human experience that actually reframe not just what we see the people we're designing for doing, but it often reframes the understanding of the problem that we think we're solving in the first place. And if many of you are researchers, you'll have had that experience that you're going into a field with a brief for a problem that has been defined somewhere, and when you're hanging out with people, whether you're doing focus groups or other kind of research, you often discover that the problem that you think this project is meant to solve isn't actually the problem, or there's more to the problem than what you were led to believe. And it's through this thick description that we start to see we're sometimes asking the wrong questions. So I often use this analogy. You can go into the field and you can say, how do you like your steak? But if you're going to provide a thick description that's going to reframe what we're doing here, it may be more important to ask, why are you eating? What does eating mean to you? When do you like to cook? And when do you like to stay at home? What do you remember about cooking from your childhood, and what stands out? When we ask these different kinds of questions, it allows us to really expand how we understand opportunities for design. So just 3 quick examples of how we've used anthropology to reframe some of the taken for granted assumptions embedded in how we understood the problems we thought we were solving. So the first example was a patient experience design project. And the task was to understand the moment of injection for a particular biologic medication. So our client had a prototype of a self-injection device for patients suffering from different autoimmune diseases. The idea was that it's not a pleasant experience having to self-inject with a biologic medication on a regular basis. And there was a sense that patient support programs could be created to better support this moment. So we went into field, and that was the brief. Understand the experience of injection, the moment of injection, with the goal of eventually identifying opportunities to create a patient support program there. So we did ethnography in the homes of people suffering from Crohn's and rheumatoid arthritis, and we hung out with them, and we spent time with them, and we spoke with their caregivers, or we spoke with their spouses or partners. And we discovered something really interesting. There was no moment of injection, actually. The experience of having to self-inject with a biologic medication on a regular basis, this experience transcends the treatment journey. And in fact, there are many more places than the actual moment of injection that are filled with more fear, more anxiety, more trepidation. Those moments in between injections, for example, where you catch a glimpse of your medication in the fridge and it reminds you that, oh, I'm 2 weeks away from having to do this again. Those moments, those interstitial moments in between. When we discovered that the moment of injection wasn't really a very significant thing for these people, it opened up an entirely new set of opportunities for understanding what patient support could be. From that really important reframe, there is no moment of injection, we were able to provide a new set of touch points and then develop programs around them that really differentiated these services for this client. So another example of a really interesting reframe. There was a fintech company that came to us, and they had this financial platform that was meant to help broker the sale of homes, in particular around the acquisition of title insurance. So this particular product was aimed for lawyers, and they had created this platform and they had launched it, and no one was using it. And so they didn't understand why. So they asked us to go and figure out how do we optimize this platform for lawyers, because they are the people who are responsible for making sure that title insurance is acquired during the process of a home sale. So we did a whole bunch of ethnographies in law offices, which was really fun and interesting. And I'm serious, it was really fun and interesting. And we discovered something pretty interesting. Lawyers don't actually do the things required to acquire title insurance. Clerks and paralegals do. This platform was designed for the wrong set of core users. We were asking the wrong questions to the wrong people. So what ended up happening was that after we started hanging out and spending time with the clerks and the paralegals, we realized that the clerks depend on their tools to really minimize the cognitive load of all the multitasking they need to do in a day. And that introducing this new platform as a new tool in a very busy context increased their cognitive load to a point where they were just like, forget it, it's easier for me to just do this the old way. Identifying this gap in understanding around who their core users were allowed us to actually craft a set of design principles that were derived from the experiences of clerks, and it allowed us, the company, to redesign how they could engage with this platform to minimize their cognitive load at those particular touch points. So the last example of a critical reframe that we've got today is about the future of logistics, mistaking process for service experiences. So one of our clients came to us. They're an international shipping and logistics provider. And they wanted to, they had identified that along the shipping journey for small and medium business owners, there was a particular place along the journey where, in particular, trying to get those packages across international borders and clear customs was a critical break point on their journey. Right? So small and medium business owners had been identified as a strategic target for them, and they wanted to fix this part of the journey. So we did a global ethnography in 9 markets, hanging out with small and medium business owners, understanding what's shaping, what are the contexts that are shaping their experiences of shipping. We did tours of international shipping hubs, like at the airport. Absolutely fascinating. I know it sounds really boring, but shipping hubs are actually really interesting. And we also did a whole bunch of heuristics where we were sending and receiving large items from all the different IIeX offices globally to try and experience what it's like to try and get strange items overseas. We were trying to package up pieces of furniture and send them through freight from Toronto to San Francisco, and weird medical devices from New York to London, just to see the process for ourselves. And we almost lost a very important piece of furniture that would have got us in a lot of trouble, but anyways, it all ended fine. What we actually learned through this process, and our client kept asking us when we were hanging out and doing our immersions to probe on very specific process questions. And the conversation kept leaving those process questions to talk about other parts on the shipping journey. And what we learned when we looked at what was happening and how these conversations kept getting diverted by the people that are actually doing the shipping and receiving is that the questions that the client were interested in were process questions that sat below the line of customer visibility. While these processes underpin the experiences of their customers, the customers don't see them, nor do they care about them, right? They care about the experience that they have trying to send a package. And it seems like a nuanced difference, but it represented a paradigm shift for this client to think about what they were doing through the lens of experience instead of the lens of process. And it opened up entirely new ways of thinking about how they should solution. It took them away from thinking about things like, should the options appear on a drop-down menu, or should there be a training module for people to use our system, into entirely new ways to anticipate the kinds of things that would go wrong from a customer experience perspective. So again, this really allowed us to change the way that we approached solutioning for these people. That's pretty much what I wanted to say today about the reframe, and it's just a little bit of a build on what Ingvald was talking about, really about the importance of context. And again, going back to this idea of, sometimes it's really important if we're in a restaurant and we know that people are going to order steak, we know we need to ask them how they like it. You have to ask that question sometimes. I think the point is being able to take a step back and realize if we're not in the restaurant and we don't just want to serve steak, and we really want to open up the kinds of opportunities and experiences that we'd like to provide, we need to start asking those different questions, like why are you eating? Thank you.